Raymond, thanks very much for joining me this afternoon. It's always great to catch up. To start with, can we go with a real general question in what's happened to public toilets over the last 20 years?
Absolutely. The comes from 2011. In 2011, the government took 20% off all the UK local authority budgets. So in the years prior to 2011, from the war probably onwards, we had the good times, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s and whatever, the noughties, where there was lots of money about and councils were out there and they were happy to build toilets and run toilets and do things. But in 2011, the whole landscape changed and austerity kicked in, and councils suddenly said, hang on a second, we've had 20% cut off our budget, so therefore we now have to concentrate on the mandatory things: clean the streets, empty the bins, bury the dead, look after schools, roads or whatever. The other things, which are what they call discretionary services, brings in toilets, park benches, litter bins, tourist information signs, roundabouts, flowers, flower baskets. So all the discretionary services took the hit. And of course, toilets were probably one of the biggest units within that, in the amount of money, because it's costing about £15,000 a year to run a public convenience, whatever sort of stuff. So when councils who over the years in the build up to 2011 had taken on more and more toilets, and suddenly you find a council with 20, 30 maybe public toilets, they had to suddenly turn around and say, hang on, we need to cut our cloth, therefore we'll close 50%, 60%, 70% of what they had before. And it was quite a significant cut. We actually reckon in total we've lost 60% of all the public toilets since 2011 to 2020. Now that's coming down from somewhere about 5,000 to 6,000 to probably 2,500, something like that, individual public units. Now over that time, you've got to remember also, Tom, that we've had a couple of other things. We've had fast food restaurants suddenly appearing all over the place. We've got out of town supermarkets appearing, and even in town, express stores, mega stores, whatever. And a few people have sort of taken up the cudgel because there was so few toilets. Quite a few people have come into these what we call community toilet schemes and joined in and said, look, come along and use our toilets, whatever. But those toilets are never going to replace public toilets, where toilets are open from 6 o'clock in the morning to maybe in the summer 9 or 10 o'clock in the evening. So people delivering, van drivers, lorry drivers, bus drivers, emergency services, care workers can use the toilets on their way to and from work. And in the evenings, people out walking and enjoying the countryside, enjoying the beachfronts or whatever, can use the toilets after things. The shops have their trading hours, obviously 9 to 5, so that it's brilliant at that time. But public toilets is a separate issue, and as I say, this austerity has come in. We've reported many times to government and said there has to be some sort of provision put in for public toilets, but at this point in time and up to this date, there isn't.
So why is reversing that trend so important right now in the midst of a pandemic?
Well, I think when COVID landed, I mean, the first thing the government turned around and said was, wash your hands, and wash your hands repeatedly, for 20 seconds and sing happy birthday, 2 verses or whatever it was. Where do you wash your hands? If you're away from home, if you're out of your house and you're away shopping for the day, working for the day, it's fine if you're in work, but if you're visiting friends, visiting neighbours, travelling to distant locations, going to the seaside, going to the park, you have to have somewhere to wash your hands. And you got to remember that, toilets, for the BTA, the toilets have always been about health and well-being, about equality and social inclusion, about bringing together communities, but also about public dignity and public decency as well. We can't have people going in the bushes and going behind trees and under bridges or whatever sort of stuff. We're in the 21st century. That's just not acceptable. So toilets are an absolute vital piece of infrastructure. But when you suddenly get a pandemic and a COVID, something like this comes along, you've got a number of issues. You have to wash your hands. You have to sanitize on a regular basis. If you want to keep your economy flowing, you want to keep people coming into town, spending money, then they've got to have a toilet. They've got to be able to go, because that's something we all do. And if there aren't toilets, then those people will get back in their cars and leave. So toilets have quite a massive economic effect on a local village, town, city, throughout the country as well.
And I mean, you touched on there that toilets are vital infrastructure, and that's something that the BMA and BTA absolutely agree on. Why is it you think that that view that toilets are a piece of the infrastructure network isn't shared widely, and what we're going to do to reverse that trend?
Well, unfortunately, we've always said that we can't find a minister who wants to be the minister for poo or the minister for toilets. Or loser. Nobody wants to be the loser, and you know, there's been a few ministers, and when it suits them politically, they call us up and they say, "Come and take some photographs with us," and we've opened this wonderful toilet. But there's no one that actually has got the portfolio, because we think, you know, for many years, toilets were treated as waste management, because that's what they did. They managed the waste and got rid of it, locked away. But really, toilets are, as I concur to, about health and well-being. They're about people being able to leave home and go and travel about and spend more time away from home. They're about social inclusion and building that community, people feeling, getting local shops and getting local things going, equality for people with disabilities and accessibility issues of all types. But so it falls under a number of remits, Tom, and we think the problem is it probably should be picked up by the Department of Health, because toilets are really about health and well-being. That's their primary thing. It could be picked up by the Equality Division. It could be picked up under Social Inclusion, Department of Justice, Human Rights, etc. So at this point in time, nobody knows where the portfolio sits or where, and really what we find in the Far East, if you go to Singapore, China, Hong Kong, Indonesia, places like that, they have a Department of Sanitation, and the Department of Sanitation looks after toilet and sewage and you know, dumping and waste and all those other bits and pieces. But you know, there's one department that looks after toilets. When it comes back to the government over here, it falls under so many different remits that what our job, I think, is to get, you know, the government to realise that the importance, the vitalness, the essentialness of this particular service, and make a portfolio and make a department, or within a department, that actually says, right, we will look at the current provision and the future provision as well, because we've got to take toilets to a new level from where we are with this COVID virus and whatever there is now. But even just from the point of view of the 21st century, many toilets, as you probably well know, are stuck back in the 1960s, where the planners put them together for probably a much smaller population. You know, even over the last 20 years, the population has expanded so fast, and you know, we have these bank holiday days now and fun days and whatever, and air shows, and suddenly you know, our cities and towns swell 50-fold and 60-fold type of stuff, and you're still relying on provision that was put there 40 years ago to cover it, and it just isn't enough. So we need someone with some strategic thinking to sit down and say, should every council in the UK have a strategy, a toilet strategy, as they've done in Wales? The Minister Mark Drakeford, before he became First Minister, put down a health bill, the public health bill in Wales. Then that Section 7 says every council in Wales is hereby designated to devise a strategy on public toilets, which they all did, all 22 councils did. Now that's coming up for review very soon, but at least it meant that the council had to sit down, it had to call all the different departments together and bring them around the table and say, right guys, what do we need to do to get more visitors, to keep our residents happy, look after the children, families with young children, people with accessible issues? And it got those councils coming together internally and put some stuff together. And I'm delighted to say that there's been a whole raft of new projects that have sprung out of that. Councils that you wouldn't, you know, had for years had said, not really, you know, it's not our priority.
So ownership is key. You've mentioned a couple of potential policy measures there at a local level that you'd like to see. What other policy measures are there that government should be considering?
Well, I think there has been no legislation whatsoever as far as toilets are concerned. We've got you know, wee bit in equality law as far as employees are concerned. You have a little bit with cafes. If you're serving food on the thing, you've got your miscellaneous provisions, legislation on there. But what we actually need to see, we think we need to see the government setting down a proper policy, working with people like BSI and ourselves and yourselves, many other organisations, and sitting saying, look, what do toilets need? Okay, we've had these things from the past and we've sort of upgraded them and we've sort of fiddled and messed about with them. Now what we need to do is we need to design a toilet that is acceptable for everybody. that children can use. Where are our low-level wash basins? Where are our low-level urinals and toilets? Very, very few toilets in the UK have such things. We need privacy boards, separation probably for COVID, but at the same time, separation boards between urinals for privacy and for young people and old. We need to look at things like automatic flushing. We need to look at automatic touch doors or automatic doors themselves, the ones that sweep open so we don't even have to put our hands there. We need to look at the surfaces, and we need to look at a whole range of things within toilets. And so government, I think, has to try and get the planners, and because for many years when councils go to build a toilet block, they'll say to the planners, we've got this space, we want a toilet block. The planners will go dead on, take that bit out for the accessible toilets and divide that one in two, half male, half female. And those plans and those conditions are no longer feasible. As a nation, we're getting bigger because we've got McDonald's and KFCs and various other bits and pieces, but we're wearing thicker clothes because of the colder climate. We're carrying bags with us. We've got travel. If you go to an airport, there's no point having a standard toilet in an airport when you've got a luggage and a briefcase with you, or luggage and a handbag with you. You're going to need additional space to put the case and you can't leave it outside the cubicle, so you need it inside the cubicle. So we need to look at the columns of clearance. We need to look at the size of the toilets. We need to look at the height of the pots, because different people are different heights. Many of us, as you know, are getting over the age of 55 now. A wee bit over that again. But we need rails. We need strengthening rails, ambulant rails, to get down onto the pot and then get back up again. And you see very few toilets that have ambulant cubicles. And with accessible cubicles, we have a number of problems apart from just the general day-to-day things. We have problems with drugs and antisocial activity and homelessness. And while it's not our position to address those issues directly, and we're very understanding of some of those issues, we can't let those issues affect toilets, because if we allow damage and destruction, whatever, to go on in these toilets, then each toilet lost is another soldier down. So we need to find ways of strengthening up things like the radar system. Because when radar was introduced, it was great. It was £9 a key. You had to supply your validation documents, whatever. Now you can buy a key off Amazon for £1.82. Mm-hmm. Everybody has one. The radar locking system is probably no longer valid, really, or it's getting that way very quickly. So we need to look at new systems. I think most of the industry already knows we're moving towards a pay culture. So free toilets are probably a thing of the past if government isn't going to put the money in. If we are going to maintain the stock and we're going to build on the stock, then we're going to have to find a way of inducing some sort of revenue. And considering that this started off as a penny, spend a penny in 1851 or whatever it was, a penny back then would have bought you a loaf of bread or a bag of sugar or a penny black stamp. So if these prices were into 99p, 89p, 69p. So we're now looking at charging systems coming away probably from the 20p's, whatever, and maybe going to 50, 60, 80 pence for public toilet use.
Cashless as well, I'm guessing. Cashless as well.
And cashless as well, Tom, you're absolutely right. And more so than anything, because cashless as well will help with the antisocial activity, because they won't be using that sort of money if they're going to off to do other bits and pieces type of stuff. So yes, you're absolutely right. Contactless cards, and some wonderful ideas coming out of that as well, where you get a community involved, and the card, the money that they charged on the card, some of that money can go back into the community for children's playgrounds or festivals or fun fairs and all those. So communities are helping to generate and themselves. But yes, there's a whole range of changes that are coming through, and we think government really has to take a step up and say, right, okay, we understand through COVID that toilets actually are frontline services. The cleaners and the people who supply these things and the service engineers and everything are literally frontline services, because we as a human species can't function without toilets. We need them in the right places. We need them open at the right times, whatever. So to bring a bit of a priority on, I think we need to sit down with government and say, here's the problems that we have, you and I and many of our colleagues have endangered and endured over the last 15 years 10 years, whatever length of time. I'm 20 years here. Can't believe it already. 20 years have flown by, but it's so enjoyable. But here's the problems that we know. Here's the ones we understand. Here's the ones we anticipate coming. Now, give us the wherewithal, give us the policy, and let's start putting these together.
And a big role for manufacturers too.
Oh, very much so. Absolutely, the manufacturers mean it's a multi-billion-pound industry, and the manufacturers, all the big guys, they even right down the toilet roll manufacturers, the appliance manufacturers, and all the accessory manufacturers have a massive role to play in all this. And that's why we sit on the BCC with the British Cleaning Council with many major organisations, and they're coming to us for advice and guidance, and we likewise going to them. But we need to know that toilets are. I mean, it's not like buying a jumper or buying a car or going out for a sausage roll. This is something we have to do as a human species. We have to go to the toilet, and there's no reason why it should be a horrible experience like it was 30 years ago, before I joined. Dirty, dingy, smelly places, and dirty floors and dull lighting, whatever. Toilets nowadays, we've seen some beautiful examples. You can go around the country, Tom. You've seen them as much as I have. Some of these fantastic things where the manufacturers step in and put these wonderful toilets with hidden lighting and different colors and waterfalls and things. Toilets can be beautiful. Toilets are beautiful, and there's no reason why we can't afford to put those things right. And once they're managed, and I think one of the things that which we particularly harp on about is anything can be broken, but if you manage it properly and take it along, most people will actually treat it properly with respect if it's well appointed and well looked after.
Raymond, always a pleasure to catch up, and look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Tom, thank you very much indeed. God bless you, and keep up the good work.